So I wanted to introduce you today as the great Rick Boals. How about that?
Well, I'm the only one, so you could say you could put whatever preface on that you wanted to.
That's right.
That's right. That's right.
And I wore my sweater vest for you, Rick. So kind of Mr. Rogers-ish, because I think you're the Mr. Rogers of community banking. So I wore my sweater vest for you.
Well, I like the sweater vest. I think it's a nice touch. You might want to consider doing that in the future.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna polo shirt.
Buffalo. I got my buffalo right here. My buffalo's with me every day.
There you go.
Yeah, this is you're talking here to the first winner of the Buffalo Award, the guy who did the most or the person who did the most that year for community banking. And Rick Bowles was the first recipient of that
Mhm.
award. So
Rick, why don't you start telling kind of your story, man? As for people that know the most about the most categories in community banking, it's got to be you. I mean, it's not unusual that you find an expert in one little silo, right? But most of us don't know much about the other parts. You're an expert in quite a few of them, and you've bounced all over the place and done a lot of different stuff, and you could probably run a bank in your sleep. So why don't you give us a little backstory?
Well, I'm probably a living example of the benefits of osmosis. If you live long enough and you're exposed to enough things, just the process of being around, if you listen occasionally, you're going to learn a little.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been fortunate as I think back across my career, Tan, starting, wow, many years ago, in what were the early days of technology for banks, literally converting from ledger cards to computers. And I can tell you that bankers were just, to a person, always dubious. I just didn't see how that was going to work. We trust these ledger cards, we do them every day. I don't know about this technology thing. So, getting in those early years of technology, and then also being in a management training program in my early years where you had to be a teller, you had to work in loan ops, deposit ops, all over the place. And there's not a day that goes by that I don't think that may have been the most valuable thing that ever happened to me. So
I
that
feel the
early
same way.
training that I received and the ability to see firsthand not only how those departments ran, but how technology interacted with them
Yeah.
was really just invaluable because yes, if you fast forward to today, the amount of progress, it's just stunning to see where we are today versus where we were then. But a lot of the basic underlying stuff, and Dave, you'll know what I'm saying here. I mean, it's still about making loans and taking deposits. And the banks that do that most successfully, the least costly deposits, have good underwriting process, do effective loan pricing, are generally the banks that are going to be most successful. But I think the biggest thing that's changed about technology is really just the pace of change. In those early days, I can remember when the first um, um, CRM systems came out. And it was really basically a manual process of how you did that. And that's evolved over the years. And Dave, you and I have talked many times about check handling. One of the first jobs I ever had was sorting checks. And every day for every bank, you had to sort checks down into account number sequence, send them to bookkeeping. They pulled out the exception items and all that sort of thing. Well, eventually that gave way to, where check imaging, which to my way of thinking, and Dave, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, is probably still maybe the single most impactful thing from an operations viewpoint in my banking career. Because if you ever had to get a court order to do, to go back and do research, it could take days, literally days to go through. Now you can do it in a matter of seconds.
Right.
There's just so many things like that that have come along. And Dave, you know what I'm talking about, but especially I think with regard to check imaging.
I think, when again, I think we've talked about this a couple of times, that it's so helpful. So two things. One, to be in a position to learn through different parts of the bank, be the investment officer, be the bank teller, have to balance every day, go through this whole process, right? The check sorting, all the rest of it. And then as technology takes over, I think it's so important for the innovators out there, take the time to learn how the hell we got here. And so you'll see this evolution that makes perfect sense. Like, how did we go from check imaging to all of a sudden now we've got an ATM that can sit outside the bank, to now you can actually use your card at a location at point of sale. All of this makes perfect sense when you see the evolution of how this all came about. And when you lose that evolution and you decide to leapfrog forward, well, we have compliance problems all over the place because the underlying technology behind a lot of the scenes is missing in that new stuff. And so you don't evolve in the right way. Did I say that well?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you said something that put me in mind of a story when you said ATMs, because I remember when ATMs were first introduced. And so, in our zeal uh, to bring ATMs to the bank that I was with at that time, we put our plan together and did all the research and everything. And so we went, never will forget this. We were sitting in the boardroom. Around the table are arrayed the executive management of the bank, including the CEO. So we go through the whole dog and pony thing, and we get to the end of it. And he asked the one question that we weren't prepared for. How are we going to make money on this? He said. Well, that kind of made us all sit back in our seats and say, well, now, wait a minute, we hadn't really considered that enough. And of course, in those early days, it was really more of a way of eventually, hopefully, reducing expense as opposed to making money. But
right there. This is so critical that you said that. If people understood the cost to process a paper check versus the cost to process an image, oh, we're talking pennies versus $3 or $4.
Yeah.
Right. But I think one of the things that has been true of various technologies that have come along is it's not always clear, because at that early stage, it's really difficult to project out and see all the technologies that are going to develop and how ATMs are. If you don't have ATMs, you can't be a bank, literally. But it's kind of hard at that early stage to be able to see that. So there's always the question, I think, whenever those technologies come along, are they going to help us generate revenue? Are they going to help us reduce expense? How do we justify this? And you can't blame the guy that's the CEO of the bank for going there, when you sit down and talk about something like that.
Mobile is such a great example of that. Tanner kind of cut his teeth on the mobile side, and you've got a fixed cost now that it's kind of table stakes. You have to have a mobile app if you're a bank, right? And at the same time, how do you make money here? This is a big cost that goes out every single month. And the people that do a lot of the innovating, they may have thought this through well enough, but does it translate to the boardroom very well? And I think that's where a lot of technology companies fail, is the boardroom. They're unable to sit down and fundamentally explain, okay, this is a net interest income item or whatever, or non-interest expense or whatever. And to be able to articulate this to a balance sheet perspective is massive to an institution when you're trying to do that sales process. And everybody out there, man, we can talk about annual recurring revenue. We can talk about what our burn rate is. We can talk about everything except how to fucking make money for the other guy, right? And at the end of the day, that's what innovation is about. It's not about making banking fun or making it simple or making it this. Banking has got to be, number one, safe. We can talk about innovation at zero all day. that 0 being, it's not a scale of 1 to 10, 0 is safe, 100% safe. And once we've got established that, we can begin the innovation process. But anybody can go out and say, I'm going to innovate and not be trying to maintain a 0 safety level.
Well, another thing that we've all talked about on various occasions, I can't remember a time across my career when bankers would say, we just need a little bit more regulation. If we just had more regulation, wow, we'd be so much better off.
Right.
The complaint has always been that we're overregulated. And that's probably true, although there are also occasions, recent ones that we can think of, Tanner, that you can think of, where everybody wanted to know after the fact, well, why didn't the regulator see this coming? What the hell? I would say that one of the things that is most important to our entire system is the very fact that we are so heavily regulated, because people believe at its heart the system is ultimately sound. Okay. Now, there are situations, are there failures occasionally? Yes. But in the overall scheme of things, the system has worked extremely well over time. The pendulum swings back and forth. Sometimes it goes too far in one direction or the other, but generally speaking, it always finds some equilibrium, which I think is the right place to be. But the stability of the banking system that has stood the test of time is, I think, for banks, I mean, it's at the heart of their success. Mm-hmm. And while it is overregulated on occasion, and I know there's a lot of pushback on that, it's just an essential part of the system. It's an essential part of success. Tanner, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot as you guys have been talking about, let's call it that customer experience. I mean, it's the big topic. Everybody wants to talk about customer experience. And I think back, Dad, to your point of the early days of mobile, I think what we largely accomplished was disintermediating the customer relationship by trying to apply a self-service experience as opposed to sort of more of an assisted self-service experience. And I think to Rick's point, I've thought a lot about this pendulum effect that you were speaking to. I've thought about that in, let's just call it digital delivery or service level, right? And a lot of these areas, what's the best customer experience may be a great way to make them not a customer or not have a relationship with you, right? Or anything that's differentiated from what the next app could provide. And I think that in itself has been a theorem nobody's really thought or studied very hard.
I couldn't agree more.
If you sat down with the concept of, I think what Rick said with ATMs was perfect, right? It's a massive convenience, but a marginal or fractional service, right? But it's a big convenience, and it's something that doesn't mess with your customer relationship to allow somebody to get some cash when they're out and about geographically, wherever they may be. When you start expanding that theorem too far, at some point, I mean, they feel like their relationships with a 1-800 number, if that, and I think we're testing that pendulum right now.
I'd love to sit down one day with Ben Metz, Jack, and Tom Shin, and you, and a couple of other people, and really sit down and just listen to that room discuss how we screwed up the customer relationship. And no, it's not that way. Maybe it is that way. Okay, we have a whole area now called FinTech, from Robinhood to Chime to everything in between, that is a disintermediated relationship that's now a technology relationship based on convenience or pricing or whatever. Well, and I think that's so cool to really kind of look at that. And back to Rick's point with the pendulum, right? Maybe we went a little too far on this one. We need to kind of get it back. I don't know what the right answer to all that is.
That's what I was going to ask Rick is I think if you looked at that sort of fractionalized fintech ecosystem, it's pretty vertically siloed. Like Robinhood's a great example, right? And some of the parts and pieces, but largely this, let's say, comprehensive retail banking relationship, the Chimes, kind of a womp womp. It's worked in other countries, sure, but less so here. And I think that holistically is where community banks are, especially when you get past retail and get into things like small business or, specialized areas where the fight continues to be, but it feels like the fintech fight is damn sure heading that direction. So what do you see there
Rick?
over time? Is that
Yeah,
fractionalization?
Rick, where does this go, man?
Well, I'm probably not smart enough to give the answer to that. You guys could probably answer that better than I can, but I will say this. I, I think that as much as technology is absolutely vital to each and every one of us every day, um, I think it's also important to still have in certain areas, um, especially for community banks, um, enough high touch. For instance, I'm surprised at the number of community banks that if you call them on the phone, you got to go through the same array of press one for this, press two for that, press. And I often ask CEOs, if you called your bank lately, have you tried to get in touch with your bank lately and just talk to a person? Okay. So I would expect that technology, we can't even imagine what it's going to be like 5 years, 10 years out. And it's going to continue to change our lives and make possible a lot of things that we can't do today. But um, I do think that there still are areas, especially for community banks, who more than anything else are trying to preserve what? Community.
Mhm.
And I think in a larger sense, and I know this is far afield from what you were talking about, but in a larger sense, whether it's in rural communities or in urban communities, we've sort of lost our sense of community.
Yes.
And as an example, when I was a kid, the community we lived in was sort of self-contained. Dave, you and I have had this conversation a million times. You had a bakery, you had a grocery store, you had gas stations, you had, people that lived in the community, were part of the community, and it had its own fabric.
Mhm.
And then in the larger sense, those communities all, were connected and coalesced into sort of a quilt, if you will, all the way up to the national level. And I think to a large degree, we've sort of lost that community. And I would hope that technology, as it advances, would maybe do so in a way that would help us, find that again, help us move in that direction as opposed to the sort of fragmentation that's taken place, if that makes sense.
Man, that was
I think that
actually,
was a perfect answer.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that's right. Remember the last one that leaves town on Friday night, turn the lights out. The football game is another city tonight, and so the high school, the whole town goes to travel with it. You're right. I remember the kid going to the grocery store, and I could, turn in pop bottles and get money, or I could get a piece of chicken or something and put it on my grandma's account. I didn't even have. If they'd have asked me her full name, I couldn't have told them. I mean, what I called her and what her real name was completely different. So. And it's like, yeah, no problem. They all know you. And also, you don't want to get in trouble because you never know when some guy that was your uncle's best buddy is sitting right next
Mm.
to you and you don't know what the hell's going on here. And you don't want to run down your family name because you're going to get it from all sides, right? So it kind
Yeah,
of
that
keeps,
was the downside of being known.
Mhm.
yeah.
Because whatever transgression you were a part of, when you got home and the word got back, which inevitably it would,
It will.
you're going to get your ass busted when you got home by your old man who was. So yeah. But for the most part, um, that sense of community that people had, I think, was integral to um, how people felt about themselves, how people felt more connected, I think, in ways that they feel less so that way today. And so as I think about community banking, I think about community banking being at the heart of how do we try to maintain those connections But again, I don't think it's just necessarily in a rural setting. I think it's also in an urban setting. I think community banks in those settings can have the same impact.
Well,
Uh,
something cool that you do, and I'm gonna spill the beans here. So, how do you use technology in your everyday life? We should probably have a shock feature on your phone when you're doing the wrong shit. It's shock you, right? But how do you use these things in the right way? So, what Rick does, by the way, Rick is, me and him will argue all the time about who's the best bank analyst I've ever seen in my life, right? And I always say it's him. But people that, I think he knows more CEOs and has been in more banks and talked to more people than anybody alive. And it's overwhelming the number of conversations that we have about relationships and maintaining relationships and how important that is to business, your career, and all that stuff. Okay, so here's the cool part. So, what does Rick do with technology? So, it's, people, your sons, they grow up and move away, and Chris and Alex have, he's got a doctor and a lawyer son, and they're off doing their life and busy as they can be. But yet they find time to hang out on the telephone and have this is so cool, y'all. They have a friggin' conference call for the whole football game. They'll take off a little halftime, go to the restroom, come back, connect on the conference call, and they just sit and talk during the whole football game with each other. So they have, and I mean, I just think that is the coolest thing on earth to be able to do. And, Rick's like, gosh, I'm glad they still want to hang out, right? But that use of technology and the way that you've done that to be able to spend time where you guys are cracking jokes and having a good time, I think is just awesome as hell. And I mean, each one of those guys are super successful in their life. I hope they realize how successful you are in yours.
well, I appreciate you saying that. And I'd like to say that in a moment of brilliance on my part, I came up with the concept, but it actually just kind of eventuated. Just we were talking one day, and you know, we would always talk back and forth, maybe during the course of the game, and then just little by little, it was longer and longer, and the next thing you know, we're doing it for the whole game. But this does bring up something else that I wanted to mention. When you get to be my age and you start to reflect on things, um, and you recognize the importance um, of a lot of things in your life, but none more so than those people at various times in your life who believed in you
Yep.
and who helped you along the way. And I think about in the early stages of my career, two or three people who really, I think, saw more in me than I saw in myself and who helped me develop the confidence to really um, reach out and do more than, frankly, I thought I could do at that point. And I just think that those kind of people are so important to each and every one of us. And Tanner, I'm sure you can think about people, Dave, I know you can, who had a profound impact on your life, some of whom you maybe didn't appreciate as much until you got to a later stage in your life, or relatives that you had. I was privileged when I was a kid to live next door to my grandparents.
Me too.
I spent a lot of time with in particular, my grandmother. And, it didn't occur to me until years later. Wow, what an impact she had on me. She was one of the kindest, sweetest, just she dropped whatever she was doing to spend time with me. And at the time, I was probably kind of spoiled and I didn't appreciate it as much. But later I realized and have throughout my life um, just how much those people meant to me, how important they were. And I would, every one of us have opportunities every day. You talk to people and you never know when something that you say to somebody will have a significant impact on them. And, Dave, you talked about relationships. There's nothing in life more important. And one of the reasons I keep working is I just continue to meet new people.
And you get to hang out with me.
That's right. Get to hang out with you. And a lot of young people. And it's just so interesting to see them at an early stage in their career and to think, wow, there are people that helped me at the early stage of my career. And if I could do that for them, if I could be helpful to them, even in a small way, that's worth getting up for every day.
You've done a lot. I mean, you've done so much for so many people. It's hard to find somebody when you're like, you ever heard of a guy named Rick Boals? You're like, you're kidding me. You know Rick? I'm like, yeah, I know Rick a little bit. Yeah. Uh, it, I mean, I'll tell you what, you grabbed me when you talked like that. I remember, yeah, family that meant a lot. And you'd love, wouldn't it be great to say, look at me now? You wouldn't believe it. But at the same time, what you're talking about, Rick, is the fact that you actually do see it. When you see younger people, which as you get older, everybody's younger. And Tanner's probably doing that now already too, right?
Feeling it a little bit.
You see people that you're like, man, this guy, there's something about this person or this woman that's amazing. And I see it. I can tell she kind of sees it, but doesn't fully get it yet, how special she is. And when you have an ability or an opportunity to have any kind of an impact on people like that, Tanner gave an example one time to me about, giving a waitress who's having a bad night a good tip, or helping somebody when you least have to, when there's no benefit to you whatsoever, but just having the opportunity to do that. And how important that is and what a powerful thing that is for a human to have. And I don't know of anybody, I'm not kidding you, man. Everybody talks about you as, the Mr. Rogers of banking. I mean, everybody I've ever known thinks the world of you.
I literally wore you a sweater vest today. Yeah, you're Mr. Rogers, man. We appreciate you.
Well, I'm sure that if you looked hard enough and uncovered enough rocks, you'd probably find somebody out there who maybe wouldn't share that opinion. But I appreciate you saying that. And I guess really all I've tried to do is just what other people have done for me. You guys included. I mean, when I think about the fact that when we met a relatively few years ago, and really it opened up for me just the latest chapter in my career. And I guess the other thing that I would say, I read something not too long ago. Somebody was talking about this particular article was talking about the ability to reinvent yourself along the way. And I think if you believe that part of the reason you're here is to consistently try to be the best version of yourself, then implicit in that process is you have to continue to learn, to acquire knowledge. You can't very well reinvent yourself if you're not learning new stuff, can you? But I do think it's imperative that along the way, I mean, we started off talking about ledger cards to technology. Well, look where we are today. So there's a lot of learning that goes on along the way on many different fronts. The world's a different place today than it was. And so I think it's imperative that people continue to not just do the same things over and over again, but look for ways to expand your capabilities and, in effect, reinvent yourself. And I think we all have to do that at various stages. And Dave, I'm sure you and Tanner both could look at times in your lives when you've done just that. And I just think that's critically important. Again, especially if you feel that your reason for being here is to consistently try to be the best version of yourself. And I guess that's just the way that I've looked at it. my dad told me early on, if you're not the sharpest knife in the drawer, you better get up early and stay late. And I have to say that's paid handsome dividends for me because I'm certainly not the sharpest knife in the drawer. And Dave, you're laughing, but you're not either. So
I know, man. I know. Sometimes you just gotta outwork
I
everybody.
know
Right?
that hit home with you.
Yeah, that's right. I love it, man, because you really get this. Uh, we talk a lot to people about just get in the game, man. You don't have to be the best of anything. Just get it, stay in the game. Some people are like, yeah, I watched soccer once. I don't watch that anymore. And it's like, wait. Did you learn all the rules? Did you figure it all out, right? And stay in the game. And I think that's critical with banking and technology that, some people are like, I'm not a tech guy. It's cool. You didn't have to be a tech guy in 1985, but now maybe you ought to just dig into it a little bit because it's a lot simpler to understand than it used to be. Everybody talks about the pace of change in technology, but there was a guy, a friend of ours, Darren Barney, talked to me and Tanner about creating on the peripheral, on the edges, and it is something that stuck with me so hard that that's what our country I think is best at. We're not super leaps and bounds kind of people. I mean, it's like, hey, you invented the atom bomb, not from scratch, not exactly. So everything we do is one-upmanship on something else, right? And to your point, you don't have to wake up every day and say, I'm not an expert at that, so I don't want to participate. Just participate. And you never know. One of these days, you might end up being an expert if you just stick around long enough. Because, like you say, sometimes the duration is stronger than the strength of the moment.
I definitely heard today community, relationships. I think trust was the big one. And I think the one that's popped into my head, I have to share with you guys, that just stuck with me of everything Rick was saying. I think what he basically said was you should be yourself because it's the only thing nobody else is doing. Right? I mean, there's your innovation, right? You want to do something nobody else is doing, be yourself. That's great.
Well, it's so rewarding when people think enough of you, trust you enough to share things about their lives. And to me, if somebody would ask me, well, what do you think is the most important thing has happened to you in your life? I would say without hesitation, those relationships. Just think of all the things, Dave, you and Tanner and I have shared, things that I wouldn't necessarily share with everybody. And at the end of the day, I think that's really what enriches your life in a way that nothing else will. So, Tanner, back to your comment about trust. It's not always an easy thing to win, but it's an easy thing to lose.
Yes.
Well said.
Yeah.
It's very hard.
Get the shit out of you, Rick.
Something that grabs me in this whole conversation is a lot of these conversations start out looking at a bank's balance sheet or helping somebody figure out, hey, I made a merger here, but I can't figure this one part out. Where did we go wrong, right? Or why are these two things not valued the same? Can you help me understand that? There's a million of these that Rick and I have done, and a bunch of them we've done together. But you have a conversation that starts there, and then you help somebody, and then you help them again and again. And, Tanner talks about, just having a positive balance with people in life, try to do the right thing. And that's where it starts. And I think a lot of people can hear this conversation we're having and get it, but I don't think they get where it starts from. And it starts from integrity. There's no reason to be a shyster. There is no value that you think there isn't. Having integrity and having people say, I mean, we're on a conversation with my best friend and my son. What would I want people to say about me? Well, damn sure isn't he's a shyster, or boy, he made a whole bunch of money. I'd much rather people say he's a good man and he's done well and he's fair with people. That would be a much higher compliment. And that's where you get to that level, I think, of trust is be knowledge. And again, stay in the game, learn, be educated enough that you're in a position that you can help somebody and then freely give it with nothing in expectation in return. And over time, you're going to get a phone call one day about their dog passed away. And you just don't get that in business today very often. And what community banks are missing is that reignite that part of the relationship with their customers.
And then it comes fourth quarter and you start getting all these phone calls as people like, hey, I got an extra $20,000 in the budget. Just sign me up for something. I'll kick it to you. Right.
Right.
It's like, wow, just friends, man. People that anytime anybody calls you, do favors, take care of people. And I think you said something that struck a nerve with me kind of the wrong way, but it was fair. I don't believe in fair. I don't give a shit about fair. Nothing in my life's ever been fair. I've either gotten really lucky, right? Or gotten a super, unfair break to the positive or the other way. And so in relationships, I don't give a shit if it's fair to me, it's just go try and do a good job and take care of people and do everybody right. And if enough time goes by that you're being shystered in return, then you prioritize those relationships and those people a little bit less, but it doesn't have to be fair. If your expectation for the world is looking for fair, you're going to get let down a lot.
True.
I don't need fair, man. I have a big smile on my face. I don't care. I can get screwed. I can afford it. Bring it on. All good. Happens
Rick,
every day.
what do you think about that? I mean, I know you have been around a long time and you've probably gotten the wrong end of the stick many times. It doesn't seem to slow you down.
Well, honestly, I would say that I've been pretty fortunate in my life, and I'm so thankful for that. Fortunate to have a wonderful family, great friends. Um, I do think that there is inherent in all of us, even though, as you said, Tanner, you can't depend on things being fair all the time because often they're not. And yet, somehow, I just think it's in our core as human beings that we do sort of expect there to be some fairness in life. And um, I, I think when things aren't fair, I think it does bother people a lot. I think I've been very fortunate in my life, and yeah, there have been occasions when I've been on the wrong side of something where it wasn't fair, but I learned from that. And Tanner, I think that's kind of what you're saying.
Yep.
And honestly, some of the hardest lessons you learn are getting whopped upside the head in boot camp, Dave,
Yep.
or whatever. That at the time you thought, geez, boy, I sure didn't need that. And then later on, you look back and think, well, I probably learned a lot from that. So, you know, if you if you expect life to be fair all the time, you are going to be disappointed. But I think there are things you can learn from those. Well, it's often been said that you learn more from your failures than your successes. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. I think we do.
I really feel like my gut, Rick, is if you're disappointed, you need to get out of that headspace as quick as you can, because if you're consistently disappointed, it's probably on you. And if
Way to
the
look at it.
brings
Yeah.
you a bunch of bad shit, then you need to figure out how to be positive and keep going, keep a smile on your
Yeah.
face. It's something you do. I rarely have ever seen you even, you take a lick or two, and rarely do you frown on something for more than a minute or two, give it a cuss or three and move on, and just having a generally, 90% really positive outlook. Just, I don't know. I think all those kinds of people gravitate to each other and do the bulk of the good around here, trying to be positive and be helpers.
Well said, Tanner. Well said.
I've had some damn times where Rick will call me on the afternoon and Friday afternoon and say, right now, look out the window. What do you see? And I'm like, well, right as you said that, a damn duck flew over the pond. And he's like, isn't that beautiful? Isn't that great? And I'll tell you what, I'm the luckiest guy alive. I get to work with all my friends and family. And this camaraderie that we have, I tell people all the time, especially young people, that, oh man, life is so full of loss. It's unbelievable. If you're lucky, everyone you've ever known and respected and loved will pass away and you'll be left alone. That's as good as it gets. It's horrible. But if you fill your heart back up a little bit every day, man, that's how you get up with a smile on your face. You're optimistic and ready to take on some more cool stuff. And Rick, you do that for me all the time, and I certainly appreciate it.
Me too. I actually have had my wife, who's going to be editing this, told me not long ago that, Rick will call and check on her, once or twice a week and just ask her all about what's going on. She's like, I think Rick might be my best friend.
Yes, I heard that.
Yeah. Yeah. That is like the coolest compliment ever, man. So exactly what you were talking about, Rick. You do that for people and it is sure appreciated.
Well, that'll be the nicest thing I take away from this session today, because she is one of a kind. But you know what? There's a lot of one of a kinds out there. And if you bother to really get to know people, you'll find that that's true.
Yeah.
And you learn so much. I've learned so much from her.
Mhm.
So many other people that I can talk about. I won't, but it's all about relationships. And
It really is.
it is. That's really all that matters in the end.
All right. Well, thank you, Rick. I had an absolute ball. As always, it's just sit down and talk to somebody like you and just pick up perspective, man, and good things that are good reminders and things to push forward with. So thanks for joining us. We love you. We appreciate you. And we'll catch you next time.
Right back at you. Thanks.